Have you ever felt like life just stopped moving? Like you're stuck in a place you didn't plan to be for longer than you ever expected? Moses did too. He went from Prince of Egypt to a nameless shepherd in the desert. Not for a few months, for 40 years. That's a long time to feel forgotten. A long time to wonder if you missed your calling. Or worse, if God changed his mind. But here's the truth. God wasn't punishing Moses. He was preparing him, in silence, in obscurity, in a place no one else could see. Because sometimes, the most sacred work God does in us happens where nothing seems to be happening at all. So if you're waiting, if life feels quiet, if you're wondering when your moment will come, you're not behind. You're being built, just like Moses was. God doesn't rush greatness, and neither should you. Moses had everything the world respects: power, education, position. He was raised in the palace of Pharaoh, trained like royalty. Everyone saw his potential. Everyone, except the one who actually called him. Because God didn't use Moses at 40, when he was strong, confident, and ready to act. He waited until Moses was 80, until he had nothing left to prove, until the only thing he carried was humility. Think about that. The man chosen to part the Red Sea first had to spend decades parting sheep from danger. Before he led a nation, he led flocks in silence. Before he spoke for God, he had to learn how to listen. And maybe that's exactly what God is doing with you. Maybe this season of waiting, this long, quiet stretch of uncertainty, isn't a punishment. It's training. It's shaping you into someone who doesn't just carry calling, but carries character. This isn't just a story about Moses. It's a story about you. If you've been waiting, wondering, and feeling like nothing's moving. Because today, we're going to look at 6 strategies God used to build Moses through delay, and how those same strategies might be shaping you right now. Let's begin. 1. Wait where it looks like nothing is happening. Maybe you know what it's like to make one mistake and watch everything fall apart. That's what happened to Moses. He didn't land in a new opportunity. He landed in Midian, a place no one brags about. No spotlight, no progress reports from heaven. Just sand, silence, and sheep. 40 years, no movement, no miracles, just waking up to the same routine. Day after day, wondering if he had been disqualified or simply forgotten. But something strange began to happen. The longer he stayed, the quieter he became. And the quieter he became, the more his soul began to slow down. The noise inside, the regret, the questions, the striving, started to fade. And in that stillness, he heard something deeper. Not the echo of his ambition, not the voices of Egypt, but the shaping presence of God. Because here's the twist. Silence isn't absence, it's alignment. And delay isn't denial, it's design. We think if it's not productive, it must be pointless. But God builds differently. He forms greatness in places we try to escape, in routines that feel beneath us, in seasons that seem like detours. So if you're here now, circling the same emotional ground, stuck in a job that drains you, watching others pass you by, you're not being punished, you're being prepared. God doesn't build leaders in the spotlight. He builds them in the shadows, where no one's clapping, where nothing's trending, where character forms quietly, brick by invisible brick. And one day, without warning, the bush will burn, the silence will split, and heaven will whisper, "Now." Because you weren't waiting for your big break. You were becoming someone who could carry it without being broken. So let me ask you this. What if the stillness around you is exactly what your soul needs to become unshakable? 2. Detach from your timeline. God's clock is different. So if you're standing in a season that feels still, you're not forgotten. You're being forged. And the quiet you're surviving now is the strength you'll stand on later. But here's the part no one likes to admit. Waiting is one thing. Waiting without knowing how long is another. Because after a while, we don't just ask, "Why am I here?" We start asking, "Why is it taking so long?" That's where Moses' story speaks again. At 40, he felt ready. He had the training, the passion, the sense of calling. He tried to step into leadership, and it crumbled beneath him. And then, silence. Midian, year after year, until one day, he was 80. By then, his fire had cooled. His ambition was gone. He didn't even feel qualified anymore. But God hadn't forgotten him. He was just waiting for the right time. Because God's not bound by urgency. He's not measuring your life by social milestones or birthdays. He's looking at the alignment of your heart, at your capacity to carry what He's preparing. And that kind of readiness, it doesn't run on your schedule. We all build mental timelines. I should be married by now. I should have found my purpose. I'm falling behind. We think purpose has a deadline. But God isn't building careers. He's building character. Because you can't walk in faith and be obsessed with your own deadlines. You can't fully trust God and still demand He works around your calendar. Here's the strategy. Detach from your timeline. Release the pressure to arrive on time. Let go of the fear that you're too late. And trust this, God knows exactly when your name needs to be called, and when He does, you'll realize the wait didn't delay your destiny. It prepared you to walk in it, fully ready. 3. Lead after you've been led. Before Moses ever stood before Pharaoh, he stood behind sheep. Before he led a nation through the Red Sea, he followed a man named Jethro through the quiet hills of Midian. And that wasn't a coincidence. It was curriculum. Heaven's leadership program has a different syllabus. God didn't catapult Moses into leadership. He walked him through the side door, the slow, humbling path of following, for 40 years. No titles, no applause, no divine promotion. Just land that wasn't his, sheep that didn't belong to him, and instructions from a man who didn't carry his destiny. Let's be honest. That's not the leadership story we like. We want spotlight, speed, significance. But God says, if you can't follow in silence, you can't lead in power. So Moses stayed, he showed up, he listened, he led from behind, and something invisible began to form. He became less reactive, more observant, less obsessed with control, more anchored in quiet strength. Real leadership doesn't start when you step on a platform. It starts when you kneel in a pasture. It's not about your turn. It's about learning how to serve faithfully. When it feels like your turn may never come, maybe that's where you are. Supporting someone else's dream, holding the camera, taking the notes, carrying the weight without the recognition. But what if that's not a detour? What if it's divine development? Because before God hands you influence, He hands you a towel, and He asks, "Can you wash feet when no one's watching?" You see, the wilderness doesn't just build leaders. It exposes motives, it scrubs away ego, and it teaches this unshakable truth. You can't lead with integrity if you've never followed with humility. So here's the strategy. Don't despise this season of obscurity. Serve without applause. Submit without resentment. Follow when no one cheers. Because when you've been led well, you'll lead from empathy, not ego. From stillness, not striving. So ask yourself, am I showing up where God placed me? Even when it's not where I want to be seen. 4. Turn weakness into God's weapon. After all the years in the wilderness, after silence, service, and soul-shaping, God finally speaks, not in a whisper, not in a dream, but in fire, a bush burning, yet never consumed. It's holy, it's loud, it's unmistakable, and still, Moses hesitates. Who am I to go? I don't speak well. I'm not qualified. I'm not the one. Isn't it strange? The same man who once tried to lead with boldness in Egypt now stands before God and tries to lead with excuses. But here's the part that hits home. Most of us have been there. We finally get the nudge, the opportunity, the whisper from heaven that says, "Go." And instead of stepping up, we shrink. Not because we don't believe in God, but because we don't believe He could use us. We point to our weakness, our voice, our story, our trauma, our failures, as if heaven hasn't already seen every scar. But what if that's the exact part God is waiting to use? Here's the plot twist. God doesn't correct Moses by inflating his confidence. He doesn't say, "No, you're better than you think." He says, "I will be with your mouth." In other words, I'm not sending you because you're strong. I'm sending you because I'm with you. God doesn't fix your weakness. He fills it. He doesn't ask for polish. He asks for surrender, because the calling isn't about your capability. It's about your availability. So here's the strategy. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop rehearsing every disqualification. Bring your weakness to God. Not as an excuse, but as an offering. Because the moment you lay it down, He picks it up and turns it into a weapon that hell never saw coming. So let me ask you, what part of you have you been hiding that God might be trying to highlight? 5. Obedience is greater than speed. By the time Moses stepped back into Egypt, he wasn't the same man who left. He was slower now, calmer, not because he was weak, but because he had finally learned that the power of faith isn't found in how fast you move, but in how deeply you trust. Moses wasn't in a hurry anymore. He didn't show up with plans, ambition, or bravado. He came back with one thing: obedience. And that obedience didn't always look impressive. Sometimes it meant going straight to Pharaoh and being rejected again and again. Sometimes it meant saying exactly what God told him, even if it didn't make sense. Sometimes it meant waiting between plagues or leading people who constantly doubted him. But through it all, Moses didn't move ahead of God. He followed, step by step, even when the steps were small, even when they were slow. There's something powerful about a heart that no longer rushes ahead trying to fix everything, but instead listens carefully and acts only when the Lord speaks. We live in a world addicted to speed. We want answers now, results now, breakthrough now. But heaven doesn't work like that. Heaven builds slow. Heaven speaks in rhythms, not deadlines. And heaven often asks us to do what feels backwards, to wait, to stay, to take the longer road. But obedience, true obedience, isn't passive. It's precise. It means moving even when you're tired, pausing when you feel pressure, trusting even when the timeline makes no sense. Because the truth is, you can move fast and still miss God. You can act boldly and still be out of sync. But when you obey, fully, honestly, quietly, you create space for God to show up in ways you never could. So here's the strategy. Don't confuse motion with obedience. Don't rush into what looks promising and miss what's actually ordained. Let faith slow you down enough to hear the next step clearly. God isn't looking for hustle. He's looking for hearts that are still enough to hear His whisper and bold enough to act when He says go. And in the end, it's not speed that parts seas. It's obedience. 6. Divine timing elevates you without noise. We spend so much of life trying to arrive, trying to be seen, trying to prove we're ready. Like if we just work hard enough, post loud enough, hustle long enough, we'll finally step into the thing we're called to do. But Moses, he didn't climb his way into calling. He didn't pitch himself to heaven. He wasn't out looking for greatness. He was out looking for a sheep, and in that quiet, dusty place, God set a bush on fire and said, "Now." No crowd, no ceremony, just one man and one moment. That didn't need noise to be holy. That's how God moves. He doesn't elevate you with a spotlight. He marks you with fire, not because you've arrived, but because you've been emptied, because you've stopped chasing stages and started carrying surrender. See, if you lift yourself, you'll have to sustain yourself. But if God lifts you, no one can shut the door He opens. And you won't need applause to validate your steps. His voice will be enough. That's why divine timing is so powerful. It doesn't just place you, it prepares you before it places you. So when the moment comes, you don't have to become someone. You already are. Moses didn't rise because he spoke louder. He rose because he knew who he was when no one was looking. That's the kind of weight the wilderness builds, and the kind of man God can trust with a nation. So here's the strategy. Let go of the pressure to be seen. You don't need to market what heaven is preparing. You don't need to fight for a microphone. When you've been formed by fire, just keep showing up. Keep walking in obedience. Stay rooted in who you are. When there's no platform, no title, no one clapping. Because when the timing is divine, you won't have to chase your moment. Your moment will come find you. And when it does, you'll be ready to carry it, without needing it to carry you. God's timing won't miss you. Moses didn't push his way into purpose. He didn't network his way into leadership. He was called into it, not in his prime, but in the desert. Not when he felt strong, but when he had nothing left to prove. Nothing left to protect. Nothing left but God. That's how heaven works. God waits until the noise quiets, until the striving ends, until the spotlight doesn't matter, so that when He lifts you, you'll know exactly who's doing the lifting. And maybe right now, you're not being passed over. You're being prepared, not for something small, but for something sacred. So don't rush. Don't panic. Don't compare your path to someone else's pace. Because when the fire burns for you, you won't have to chase it. It will find you, in a moment no one sees, in a place no one expects. And when it does, you'll realize something powerful. God's timing didn't miss you. It was waiting for you to become the person who could carry what's coming without collapsing under it. So stay faithful, stay quiet, stay surrendered. Because sometimes the darkest places of delay are where heaven forges the strongest callings. God hasn't forgotten you. He's just still working in the dark where diamonds are made. If this message spoke to something deep in you, take a moment to like this video, and in the comments, share this. What part of Moses' journey mirrors your own right now? Your story might be the confirmation someone else is praying for. And don't stop here. Watch the next video, Abraham's Journey, Walking by Faith, Not by Sight. Because sometimes, the only way forward is to trust, even when nothing makes sense.